Building on concepts from previous videos, this one will talk about how the basic resolution mechanic can be expanded to more complex scenarios, in which multiple actions come together towards a goal. As a quick summary of the basic resolution system, in the Verve you have 4 ability scores: Dexterity, Strength, Intelligence and Spirit, each given a score between 1 and 6, which corresponds to a dice with a size equal to twice the score, the average being a score of 3 or a d6. Each of the 16 skills uses a different combination of 3 abilities, with reference to this grid. For example, the Athletics skill uses 2 strength and 1 dexterity. The result of the skill check being the sum of the results on the 3 dice used. So if you have a d8 in strength and a d6 in dexterity, the result of an athletics check would be 2d8 plus 1d6. You may also have a tool helping you in the skill, for which a tool bonus is added on top. For basic skill checks, the degree of success is determined by the exceedance of the result, this being the amount by which the skill check exceeds the target number, called a DC. An exceedance of 0 or less is a failure. An exceedance of 1 is just barely succeeding, and as you would expect, a larger exceedance is a better result, as judged by the game master, called a conductor. This is the case for simple checks, which should satisfy most of your time in play. However, some scenarios may call for a series of skill checks to achieve bits of the whole result, such as the sequential process of crafting some complex machine. Other scenarios may call for players to work together to achieve some goal, such as trying to search a room for clues. These types of skill challenges can employ additional mechanical systems to capture this detail. To determine how well players do on a skill challenge, the exceedance of each skill check can be subtracted from the challenge points, a value which represents the scale of the challenge in some way. And if the challenge point pool is reduced to 0, the players succeed. Challenge points could represent the distance to a destination, the time left to complete a craft, the amount of sound made when moving stealthily, or the degree to which an NPC is in disagreement with you. In this way, challenge points function very similarly to stamina, or hit points, for foes in combat scenarios. Skill challenges could be done through a series of sequential rolls over some period of time, such as a travel challenge, or simultaneously as a group, with each player making one roll, such as when stealthing past a group of guards. In general, negative exceedances, i.e. checks with results lower than the DC, should not increase the remaining challenge points, but in some circumstances this might make sense. For example, if you do a bad job clearing the path of thick vines, it doesn't make sense that this would take you further from your goal. But when leading the party for a period of a travel challenge, a bad roll could mean you take a wrong turn and make your journey longer. If the scenario is in some way time dependent, or the order of actions explicitly matters, and it is a situation where enough of the party are involved, you can choose to use the flow initiative system to keep track of who has acted and who will act next. Flow for combat is explained in this video, but the general premise is each acting participant in the scene has a flow value, which represents their preparedness. Each round, participants perform one action, in the order of their flow values, starting at 9 and down to 0. Actions either increase or decrease your flow, and you cannot perform an action which would take your flow score below 0. Flow can be used for skill challenges such as complex negotiations, as it will matter which arguments are presented first and which build upon points made previously, and each player will likely have something they want to add to the discussion. For such scenarios, the conductor will need to define at least 2 action types which people can take. One where people prepare for future actions by waiting. This action will cause you to gain flow, and one which involves making a skill check to progress the challenge. This action will cost flow. Depending on the scene, you may change the amount of flow gained or lost, or add more actions which relate to the situation. For example, in most situations, some kind of interaction or improvisation action will be useful, likely costing less flow than a skill check action, as it may only indirectly or situationally make progress to the primary goal. To use the travel example again, spending time to forage for food could still benefit the party in their efforts to get to their destination, just not directly. The rest of this video will describe some key examples where the skill challenge system may be appropriate, what exceedance and challenge points represent, and whether or not the flow system is needed. Negotiations. In general, simple skill checks to persuade, trick, or intimidate can use the same basic framework. Players describe or roleplay their interaction with the NPC, and the conductor can call for an appropriate skill roll. If the player's tone was closest to delicate, reasoned, charming, or forceful, the player will use the reflex, reason, charisma, or control skills respectively. For statements, the tool bonus used is based on the conductor's judgment of the words used in their statement. For example, basing an argument off something the players know about the NPC, or by building upon a previous statement in the conversation, will typically deserve a higher tool bonus, whereas mentioning a sensitive subject or insulting the NPC may result in a lower tool bonus. In general, tool bonuses should be between 1 and 8, and typically around 3. If the player doesn't want to or can't roleplay or describe their statement, they can instead use their status or education bonuses for the statement tool bonus, either assuming their character is of a high enough status or well educated enough to make a convincing argument. Status and education are properties of one's social class. To see how effective the statement was, the roll is compared against the NPC's response value. Each statement style has a default response style, either trying to logically dismiss the argument with the analyze response, or see through the speaker's character with the insight response. Analyze uses the manipulation skill, to intelligence 1 strength, and the NPC's education bonus, while insight uses the instinct skill, 2 spirit 1 dexterity, and the NPC's status bonus. This system is intended to mirror the way combat works, with statement and response styles replacing attack and defense styles. That way, if you have learned one system, you have learned both. The exceedance represents the amount by which the statement was persuading. As with all rolls, players can add effort to their rolls to gain ease, or to add modifiers to statements. There are no hard rules for what a modifier for a statement is, and they are not unlocked through class features, as this would put a limitation on how or what people can say. Modifiers apply in this context when someone is trying to achieve some secondary goal with their statement, other than directly trying to persuade the other side. For example, to flirt, to amuse, to deceive, to embarrass, to frighten, to inspire, to calm, or to confuse. Just as the player's description or roleplay of what their character says is used to determine the style of statement they are using, this same roleplay determines if a modifier is appropriate. Similarly, the consequences of these modifiers should inform how the conductor roleplays or describes that NPC's statements. Perhaps if a player successfully flirts or amuses the other side, they'll be less likely to act in an aggressive way. This might have a mechanical consequence of them not using the forceful statement style. In most cases, a single roll using this framework will be sufficient to resolve most simple social encounters, such as asking a shopkeeper for a discount. More intense negotiations can use the skill challenge rules. At the start of a negotiation, in discussion with the conductor, the players will need to decide on what the stakes of the discussion are, what each side is trying to argue in favour of, i.e., what is the party trying to get out of the NPCs, and what are the NPCs trying to get from the players. For example, the players are requesting access to the most secret archive of the city. The Arcane Council who controls access would like the party to go away and stop bothering them. Then, each side of the discussion puts forward a number of morale points towards their argument, up to their level. These morale points form the challenge point pool that each side is trying to reduce to 0, and it represents the side's resolve. As statements are made from either side, the exceedance of those statement rolls subtracts from each side's resolve, until one side or the other has run out. This can either be handled in a free-form discussion format, with everyone just role-playing out the scene naturally, and statement rolls being called for whenever a substantial statement is made. Whoever spoke last from the previous side is responsible for making the response roll. If a more structured discussion is called for, then you can use the flow system. The person with the most flow at the start of each round from either side has the metaphorical microphone, and has first dibs at making a statement that round. All other participants cannot perform the statement action, as each round represents a roughly 10-second period, and if more than one person spoke, they would be speaking over each other. The other participants can choose from the other available actions, such as listening, in which they prepare for their next action, or improvising something else. This might mean making some kind of brief supportive comment in response to their ally's words, threateningly brandishing a weapon, or anything else the player can think of that does not involve a lot of talking. At the end of the scene, the remaining challenge points, or resolve, can inform the conclusion. If it's reduced to 0, then that side is persuaded of the other's opinion. If the conversation has reached a natural conclusion, and both have some resolve remaining, they may only be partially persuaded. Just as the level of exceedance for basic statements can inform degrees of success, the resolve remaining can inform similarly. Travel, chases, and escapes. The skill challenge system can be used for tracking travel challenges, where the challenge points represent the distance from the destination. For example, travelling between two towns, each challenge point might represent a kilometre, whereas, chasing someone through the crowded streets of a city, each challenge point might represent only a few metres. Similarly, you will need to scale the amount of time each action round represents to best reflect the situation. Travelling across country, perhaps 30 minutes is a suitable timescale, whereas escaping from a collapsing cave, every second matters. This will be important because when the destination is static, players will be moving towards their destination without action based on their speed. Whereas if the destination is also moving, such as in a chase, then the challenge points will need to be reduced according to the difference between these two speeds. Everyone has a walking speed of 1.5, which means they can move 3 kilometers in 30 minutes. So, in the travelling example, regardless of the results of the actions, 3 should be reduced from the travel challenge points each round. If players wish, they can move slower to maintain their stamina, or to be more careful about their journey, or there might be environmental conditions which cause them to move slower or faster by default, which will affect this baseline rate. Similarly, riding on horseback would increase this default speed. Any skill actions used to progress the challenge should therefore directly relate to speeding up the journey in some way, such as using their survival skills to plot a more efficient route, using their inspiring charisma to motivate a faster pace, or to magically make the ground easier to walk on. In situations where you are chasing something, actions could also slow down the quarry to decrease the distance between you. For more information about movement speed, check out the video linked in the top corner. This system works really well because the challenge points can be used to inform aspects of play, such as the terrain changing or passing landmarks at specific values. Or when chasing someone, it can inform when they are within spell range, or when they are within range to throw a rope and try and catch them. For example, you can map out the distance between the two towns. The first 15 kilometers are walking alongside the banks of a winding river. The next 10 kilometers are through the forest. Then there is a 5-kilometer patch of forest, which is withered and dying, followed by 20 kilometers of forest steadily going up a mountain and getting colder. After this, there is a final 25-kilometer stretch through the mountains. You can use this to help guide challenges or obstacles which may occur, the description of the scene, and give players a means to plan ahead, by noting what they can see ahead of them, remembering that the distance to the horizon is roughly 5 kilometers. While potentially compatible with a hex crawl approach to travel, this system works best for linear journeys rather than exploration. The flow system works well for these kinds of scenes, where flow represents who is currently leading the party, as they have the opportunity to respond first to upcoming obstacles. But if the travel is not time pressured, this is not likely to be required. Some example actions and flow costs are shown below, but this should be customized to best fit the timeline and the situation. Group actions. The final key example for using the skill challenge system is group actions, where all the players simultaneously work together to achieve some goal, such as sneaking past the guards, investigating a room, or clearing a collapsed cave of rubble to try and make a path through. In these cases, the challenge points represent how much noise they make, how much they miss in a room, or how blocked up the cave is. Each player can simply make the same skill check, or can suggest some other action which helps in the goal. And if their exceedances in total bring the challenge points to 0, then they are totally successful. In this case, the conductor and players can describe how they achieved the goal, based on who contributed the most, and in what ways. If they don't fully reduce the challenge to 0, they may only be partially successful, such as making a small noise, missing a detail in their search, or resulting in a very narrow passageway they will need to squeeze through. As these actions happen simultaneously, either over a few seconds of in-game time, or an abstracted or montaged period of time, there is no need to use the flow system. So, in summary, the skill challenge system is used for complex situations where multiple actions are needed for success. The exceedance of each skill check subtracts from the challenge points to work towards completion. And just as exceedance is used to inform the degree of success for a basic check, the remaining challenge points can be used to inform the degree of success of a complex challenge. This is done by relating the challenge points to some aspect of the challenge, such as the disposition of an NPC, the distance to a destination, or the amount of noise made when trying to be stealthy. For some scenarios, the flow initiative system can be used to make sure all players have an opportunity to contribute, and that time can be tracked. In these cases, the conductor can establish what action types are available, and how much flow each action will gain and lose. With that, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you found this interesting and would like to see when I upload more videos. Thanks so much for watching.